Welcome back to Birds of a Feather Talk Together. This week, John and Shannon talked to Amanda and I about the Peg-billed Finch. This was a bird that I hadn't heard of before, and it turns out not very many people have ever seen. It's a bird that is native to Costa Rica and is very elusive except for when bamboo is flowering. It turns out that John and Shannon were in Costa Rica right at the opportune time and were able to study these birds up close and personal. I always love these kinds of episodes where we get to hear all about a new kind of bird that we weren't familiar with and that John and Shannon have a ton of knowledge and experience with. It's super fun, so without further ado, go grab your binoculars and let's get into it.
I'm interested to hear about this
Peg-billed Finch?
Yeah, because
Camp that Ops Bear Die?
Don't start. We're not started.
Yes, hold on. We couldn't find a lot. Like we like to.
That's because there isn't a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's why I picked it, because most people, you've never heard of it.
Yeah.
So we should start.
Okay, we're recording.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, we can start. And you both have seen them?
We
in
have.
The wild?
It's one of my most exciting bird moments of my life.
Oh, cool.
So this is this bird that's now placed in the tanagers next to a whole bunch of quote-unquote tanagers that look like finches.
So the finch word means nothing to people from a tree of life perspective. And when we talk about tanagers with our friend Kevin Burns, you'll see that highlighted really dramatically.
Okay.
You know, the things you think of as tanagers aren't, and the things you think of as finches aren't. And our tanagers, Darwin's finches, aren't finches. They're tanagers. Scarlet tanagers aren't tanagers. Oh. So there you go. But that's a preview.
Okay.
We'll do more of that. But this bird is enigmatic, and it was in the Emberizas or the sparrow kind of family until molecular data came along and showed that it belongs with tanagers.
Oh, cool.
Enigmatic in that way. It's also completely enigmatic in that very few people see it on a regular basis, which is just kind of crazy. So it's got this distribution in the mountains of Costa Rica, and it barely gets into Panama, and that's its entire distribution. So it's got this tiny distribution, and it just so happens that this was the place that Shannon wanted to go to do her dissertation research.
Yeah, so there's this famous place called La Jorgina in the mountains, Serra de la Muerta mountains of Costa Rica. It's a very common place for biologists to go. It's a bus stop, I guess, along the highway, and that has rooms you can rent. And so there was a bunch of birds that live in the highlands that we wanted to capture for my dissertation research, which was trying to figure out what the connections were like between North and South America for birds in Central America. Did they come from the north? Did they come from the south? How long ago? And so that was the premise, and we went to this famous place. And
But I vividly remember in preparation for this, if you're going on a trip to a place like Costa Rica, you're thinking about all the birds that you might see. And I remember seeing Peg-billed Finch in the field guide, and I asked one of our fellow grad students who did some tour leading, I said, what about seeing Peg-billed Finch? And he just looks at me and goes, nobody ever sees it.
Oh.
And so we get there, and the first morning we go out from you have a shower in that place. They used to have electricity in the water to warm the water up. I'd never experienced that before.
In the shower head.
In the shower head.
What?
It was electrified, so
Oh
the water was warm.
It works really well.
It sounds
Yeah,
safe.
but it's dangerous. You're like, my dad's an electrician. I'm no way. I'm not getting in that shower. He would not approve of this. But anyways, you get desperate and cold because it's cold in the mountains.
And you're going out into this beautiful Costa Rican cloud forest, and one of the things that happens, or one of the communities in this Costa Rican cloud forest, is patches of bamboo.
Mm.
And this bird likes bamboo, but bamboo's a weird thing. I actually looked up a lot about bamboo preparing for this. So we went out, and it was one of those things where I didn't believe my eyes. I thought I was hallucinating. Because you look at the bird in a picture book, And someone's like, that's a peg-billed finch. Do you remember who said that first? Because it wouldn't have been me, because I was awed by Costa Rica kind of in general.
I think we should give Kevin the credit.
You think so?
No, I'm not.
I don't know who was the first one who identified it, but
why peg-billed? What does peg-billed mean?
It has a very strangely shaped bill. It's kind of a little bit upturned, a little bit chiselly.
It's kind of like a peg, though. I mean, when you compare it to some of the other birds that it's been placed with. And what was so amazing about it is we were setting up mist nets to catch birds, and it was one of the commonest birds in the mist net.
Oh, really?
And so when we first got it, we almost couldn't believe it. It's like, is this really what it is?
Oh.
And at that point in time, actually, it turned out that and I still kind of can't believe this, but the nest had never been described.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And so it was very, very clear that there were plenty of peg-billed finches around.
It was the most common bird in the area, a bird that nobody goes to Costa Rica and sees on average.
And it was because the bamboo was flowering, which is something that happens in bamboo. It can be decades between flowering.
I looked it up, and you can have 3 years and up to 150 years between flowerings.
Oh, wow.
Oh, my
So
gosh.
it's a very ephemeral and unpredictable resource. So if you are a bird that specializes on eating the actual seeds of the bamboo, you have some interesting life history characteristics.
But there's still some amazing things about this bird. So there's another species that it's about the same size and is kind of similarly colored. It's called slaty finch. And slaty finch is a bird that has a big distribution going from Costa Rica down into South America and over into the tepuis in Venezuela and northern South America. And it's got long wings, which is the kind of thing you might predict for a bird to have if it was specializing on a resource that was only going to be available in certain patches in certain years. And there's pretty good evidence that slaty finches actually get up and move around. Mm-hmm. That's not true of peg-billed finch. They have these little round wings and a very small distribution.
Wait, so where do they go then when the bamboo's not flowering?
This is a $10,000 question.
Nobody knows. We don't know. So what happens to their populations? Clearly, they were having a boom year that year because there were tons of them everywhere. In fact, we didn't think we would ever see them, so they weren't on our permits to catch. Wow. So I drove back to San Jose to get this thing added to our permits because there were I don't even know if there weren't very many. There aren't very many specimens. We only have 4 in the Field Museum's collections, and so there weren't tissues of it around the world. So if you wanted to learn something about it, we needed to capture some. It's a monotypic genus. It's not related to anything, obviously. So it's an important thing to have a record of, and a record that includes not just photos or behavioral observations, but that actually documented it with specimens, because people are going to think you're crazy. Yeah. If I went back into San Jose for real and I didn't have being a graduate student at LSU behind my name, they would have said, "What are you talking about?" Yeah. But I was with some of the best, not me, but some of the best bird watchers in the world, and they knew what it was. And when they gave us permission, because they knew part of their biodiversity had not been documented very well, and this was kind of a unique opportunity. So what does it do? Do populations crash? That's my guess, is that populations crash, and only the few that are capable of really wandering around to find other patches of bamboo, because these things are so ephemeral and episodic that it's not like you can say, well, I'm going to go over here across this part of the ridge and I'm going to hang out for a year, and then next year I'll come back over. It could be decades before those things
I've always wondered whether maybe we don't have a good enough handle on exactly how bamboo works, and that somewhere within 10 kilometers from the place we were that year, maybe bamboo's flowering the next year and they can move.
They still have to find
distance.
it.
I know. No, I know. It's a crazy situation. So Shannon also went into the Natural History Museum in San Jose and told the collections manager or curator of birds that we had found these guys, and he was really interested in natural history, and the nest had never been described. And so after we finished up and had moved on, he had time in his schedule to get back up there, and he found 10 to 20 nests for the first time. And so again, it's just such an interesting story. And I feel like if you go on eBird, for instance, you'll see that there are actually quite a few pictures now. So I wonder if the bird tour folks are getting a little bit better at finding them.
I mean, that is the place we stopped is everybody goes there now. There weren't that many tours to Costa Rica.
No, but there was an awful lot of
30 years
scientists
ago.
that had gone there and hadn't encountered
that's
it.
true.
And so it's still fascinating to me to think about how that bird is actually dealing with its existence in terms of populations, because it's really hard to explain.
I mean, it does eat other things. It eats insects. It eats berries in a bizarre way. It gets a big berry and smacks it around, sucks out the juices, and tosses the peel of the berry, why would you do that?
Because you're rare.
I don't know. I guess because you can. So, there's lots of really interesting things. I mean, it looks pretty drab if you were to look at it. It's gray. The females are kind of more brownish, with a little bit of like cinnamon color on the wings and stuff like that. But its beak is bicolored. It's really interesting too. So the top and the bottom are different colors, black and yellow.
I was fascinated by the fact that it's so there's these international standards, IUCN standards for conservation status, and it's listed as least concern, which implies that the population is pretty big. And I wanted to delve into that because it's so poorly known that I don't see how you could possibly get it into that category and be very happy about it, because there just aren't that many records on a regular basis out there.
Oh, yeah.
And there is another category that they have for really poorly known birds called data deficient. And a lot of those are species of birds that are known from one or two records, and nobody knows where to find them. And this is a bird that's gone a little bit beyond that, but I don't know how you'd estimate the population size of it, because
it needs to have geo-trackers put on it so that you can, because you can't, if you've ever been to the mountains of Costa Rica, you're not following that bird on foot. No way.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think you could follow it in a drone. The terrain is just not amenable to.
Well, in theory, it wouldn't go very far, so maybe that would help. But
I don't know.
Yeah.
People haven't followed it, so. One of the reasons why we don't know very much about it. The mountains of Costa Rica are, even though a lot of people go to them, that doesn't mean you can easily walk all over the place looking for bamboo.
Yeah.
That might flower once every 20, 30, or 100 years. You don't.
But
There's not much predictive about that.
I've always thought that the thing about bamboo is, I think it's going to grow in areas where there oftentimes isn't tree cover. So with remote sensing data, you can potentially figure out where patches are. Getting to them would be a definite challenge, but I've always wondered whether that would be the way to try to figure out whether or not there's a mosaic out there of bamboo that they can always find some flowering patch somewhere. But boy, is it?
I mean, who knows what their honing abilities are? What is it that they're using to know where to go?
Mm-hmm.
And so is it the nectar then that they eat
No,
from
they're
the
eating the
flowers? Or what?
seeds.
Oh, the seeds. Okay.
Yeah, but they also eat insects. So they're not. There are other birds that are completely tied to the bamboo, eating the seeds, but these are a little bit more facultative than that. But the only place people see them in numbers is places where the bamboo is flowering. So
bamboo is essentially the 17-year cicada of the plant world, where you'd almost argue that the strategy is basically to avoid getting your propagules eaten by flowering so rarely that nothing specializes on you.
Yeah. Wow.
So I have to do, I always look up where the names come from, and this one is pretty interesting to me. So acanthus means spiky, and ops means face. So spiky face is. But then I didn't know, and this is embarrassing, I suppose. I didn't know where the beard eye came from. And do you know?
Well, it's got to be Spencer Fullett.
Yes,
Baird.
it does. So he was an ornithologist and a naturalist, and he was the first curator named at the Smithsonian, and eventually he rose to become the secretary of the Smithsonian. So,
for me, the irony is that I remember looking on a database for the birds that we had, one of these common databases that serves up collection-based data for bird collections, and I did a search because I was trying to look at things, and I decided to look for Peg-billed Finch, so Acanthodops bairdi, and I couldn't find the Louisiana records, even though I knew they were in the collection at LSU. And there's been a big problem in the literature with putting one or two eyes at the end of Baird, which has made it very hard for people to remember how to search for.
Bairdi eye is a common thing. So two eyes at the end, that's a common thing. You'll see it in printed literature. And if people aren't thinking about it when they enter the data in their databases, it could easily not, if you're looking for Baird eye and there's two, you might not find it. And if you're looking for Bairdi eye with two eyes, you might not get the one with one eye, which is the correct one. So that's a common problem with databases kind of in general. I mean, humans make mistakes. So, we get corrections to our database all the time.
Weird rules which would potentially put two eyes on the end of a scientific name.
So I was wondering with this finch, habitat destruction isn't really a problem because it's so remote.
No, it is though, because of the things people do to alter the environment in a way that bamboo goes down. So bamboo is an important. Obviously, it's important. If you go to Asia, bamboo is really important for human livelihood. So, the dynamics of bamboo have been studied more in Asia than they have been here, but it's still significantly important for people, bamboo. And if you change the conditions and lower the ability of bamboo to survive, you can lose things like this. I mean, if you specialize on something like this, you might be really happy as a clam, but you're vulnerable to anything that is going to affect that plant because you have to adapt. You have to be flexible, and some animals are just not. They're completely tuned to eating or doing that one thing and that one thing alone. So, and that's why I think the population likely fluctuates pretty dramatically of that bird.
Okay.
But the mountains of Costa Rica, compared to a lot of areas, have not had a lot of destruction in the cloud forest.
Okay.
And in a lot of areas, and Costa Rica has done a spectacular job of creating national parks in those areas, and so compared to a lot of other neighboring countries, they've done a much better job of protecting habitat. And so in that case, that's certainly good for peg-billed finches.
Okay.
Have you been to Costa Rica, you guys?
No.
That's a place you should go.
We want to go.
We'd love to.
It's
Yeah.
relatively speaking an easy place to go. And there are parks everywhere, and the infrastructure for people is really good.
Nice.
There are a lot of endemic birds that are found there and nowhere else. You can drive from one side to the other side, so you can go from the Pacific coast to the Atlantic coast.
Oh, cool.
In a few hours.
Wow.
So the changing habitats it's really unbelievable. Costa Rica has a higher rate of literacy than the U.S. does.
Oh,
higher voting percentage, people voting there. And if you're there during an election, which we were, it's wild.
Oh, wow.
Anyways, even though I had never traveled like that ever, I felt pretty comfortable getting around in Costa Rica, and I did some crazy things driving a Toyota minivan into the middle of nowhere by myself. But that was before GPS. I didn't have a map either. Anyways, I used to pay a lot more attention to geography before I had a GPS. So, and my very first day, we got there at night, and then we went out the next day, and I felt like someone had dropped me in a terrarium.
Mm-hmm.
That there were houseplants that were 30 meters tall.
Oh,
Cool.
And mixed species flocks and tons of birds at one time flying all over around your head. And it was overwhelming.
wow.
Oh, yeah, we really want to go.
Amazing. Yeah.
There was a
I mean, you can go golf there too.
yeah.
No.
So there's that kind of thing.
There's that kind of recreation.
If we go, we're going to look for birds. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of the beaches are very nice.
Nice.
Oh,
And
nice.
if our friend Josh with Red Hill Birding has a trip to Costa Rica, I would tell you guys to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
100%. So
Yeah.
you should look at everybody should look at his website,
Yeah.
Red Hill Birding. He's a great guy and he has great people working for him. And I promise you, if you go places with him, he will treat you with courtesy and be helpful, and you'll have a good time.
We'd have a big list of birds to talk about. After that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we should look into that. 'Cause
Yes.
we really want to go with like a guide. We think would be really
Yes.
cool, especially somewhere like that where, we can do as much as we can try to like read up on everything, but to go with a guide is like a whole different story.
Especially
Oh,
your
I could-
first time to a place like
I
that.
can tell you stories about that. I mean, my family went to Colombia, and which has got even more birds than Costa Rica does, and the only field guide at the time. This was would have been back in the 70s, yeah. And the only guide was this guide that had pictures of probably 3% of the birds, and some of them were just heads.
Oh.
And so you'd go out and you'd see this brightly colored tanager or some brown wood creeper, and you'd go back in the book and you'd be trying to key it out based on what it wrote, what was written about it, not about what it looked like in a plate. And
Yeah,
I've
there was
always
no
wanted
Merlin, no eBird.
Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
No,
we've lost track of those lists, but I'd love to know how many things we misidentified. And,
That's awesome.
So do you think now, like when the bamboo is flowering again, like is there more of a network, like people would realize it's flowering and people would rush to Costa Rica to go
100%
look?
That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
sure,
Yeah, I
the
mean,
guides would.
there you can look at eBird, and there are eBird records that'll tell you when the last one was seen and where, and then you can put your eBird records in too. That's how we're going to know where these birds go and how frequently they go. But we don't have banded populations of them the way we have banded populations of some of the migratory birds that then we know what happens to them when they hit the window in Chicago. But that doesn't exist there. But eBird really is an unbelievable resource for people, not just people who are looking for birds, but people who want to study the movements of birds, the biology of birds.
With an interesting caveat that in places like Costa Rica, there's a tendency for people to go to the same places
Yeah.
because they're
And
good
on
places to go
roads.
birds and to see birds, and so they go back and
I mean, that's true. If you look at maps of bird observations, it's a road map to whatever place it's in on average.
because it's hard to get off the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But still, you get a lot of insight into where to go and where birds are common through eBird. And even in Costa Rica, a place lots of people go to.
Yeah.
But I would definitely tell you if you want to dip your feet into the neotropics, that's where I would go.
Okay.
And I would go to a resort on the Osa Peninsula.
But
There
don't
are
expect
endemics there, and the resort is unbelievable.
Okay.
So
don't necessarily expect to see Peg-billed Finch.
No,
Okay.
you won't.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a big
But there are
ask,
other cool things that
Oh,
you will
for sure,
see when you're
absolutely.
yeah. Yeah.
We're gonna come back. We went all the way to Costa
Yeah.
Rica and we didn't see anything.
No, this is like I always tell people, don't get excited about those things because most of the
you'll
time
be
you won't see
excited about
it.
everything you
Yeah.
see. I didn't
Yeah.
need to
Yeah.
see anything rare like a peg-billed finch to
Right.
feel like my mind had been blown.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That happened in the park across the street from the hotel in San Jose we were in. So you don't have to go far to see something you've never seen before, or even a whole family of birds you've never seen before.
Yeah. And we went back to Colorado a few months ago, the first time since we've really been into birding, and we were so excited with all the new stuff we saw. It's just once you start paying attention to anywhere new, it like really starts to blow your mind. So,
Yes. Yeah.
But Costa Rica now, that's on the list.
Yeah. And no offense to the peg-billed finch, but it's it's not that interesting looking, right?
Its
I
face
agree.
is
Okay.
its beak is really distinctive and different. So I don't even know if we know why it looks like that.
I have this recollection
Something to do
that
with
we were
getting-
having trouble convincing ourselves sometimes in low light whether we were seeing slaty finch or peg-billed finch sometimes. So I'm just saying.
Just saying.
It was really exciting.
There's
awesome.
definitely things like quetzals and umbrella
Yes.
birds and macaws.
Right.
If you don't want to see the cool ones and don't care about the cool ones like peg-billed finches.
Yeah, we just want to see like the pretty, colorful ones.
But we'll need to do an episode sometime on wren thrush, for instance, which is this tiny little short-tailed thing that lives up in the edge of the cloud forest up in the same area that peg-billed finch is in. And it's a bird that has no close relatives and is a completely
It's pretty
unique thing.
distinct until it opens its mouth.
Oh.
But it's not so non-distinct.
Oh, very cool. That's awesome.
Cool. I think we're getting close on time for this one. Is there anything else about the peg-billed finch we want to talk about?
Go to Costa Rica.
It's a spectacular example of how some birds can be really locally distributed, which is really interesting to people like us.
Well, we do have a mailbag question. This is from Levi W., and he's from, is it Nacelle, Washington? I think I'm saying that right. So he says, my question is, and also Levi reached out when we were doing our sticker giveaway, and he said that he has 2 nephews that he's getting into birds, and he gave stickers to his nephews. So good for Levi for
so awesome.
getting his nephews going in birding. But Levi says, what bird would you suspect to be a government spy? I know a lot of people are suspicious about pigeons, but living in a rural area, I have to say robins. There are a few robins outside everywhere you look here, and they seem like they are always watching. Keep up the good work with the podcast. I look forward to each time a new episode is released.
Oh,
That's a good one.
That's a great question. Yeah.
What do you think, Amanda?
I think it's a robin, like Levi. Yeah, because Shannon, I wanted you to assassinate that one robin that was waking us up at 3 a.m.
That's not stealth and spying. That's not how you be an effective spy.
You're right.
To bang on the window of the people you're trying to follow.
I think he was like trying to get us up so he'd like take pictures of us or something.
Oh, there you go. What are you doing in your apartment bedroom at night? At 3 a.m. I don't think we want to know. But I'm going to send my bird to check on you.
You have your own that you can send?
You'll never know because my bird's going to be smart.
So I was going to go with something like turkey vulture, just because they soar around. And my recollection is that there have been some issues associated with, it's particularly in Asia, I think, of people putting transmitters on birds of prey and having them cross international borders and people being really concerned about seeing an antenna on some bird. And wondering whether there's actually
so that's
he's
legit.
bringing up some. Well, so I think the legit aspect of it ends up being the fact that the transmitter is on the bird, not that the bird is actually effectively gathering information from
working for the government.
Yeah. So, but definitely governments have gotten upset about that.
Oh, that is really
Okay, RJ.
interesting.
Who are you picking then?
So I think a mallard duck. I feel like they're kind of stealth. Like there's plenty of times where we'll be at like a pond and all of a sudden we don't realize there's a duck sitting there like 2 feet from you and you look and they're everywhere. I feel like they're very common. I guess you'd have to be near water most likely, but I could see mallards being a government spy.
Yes.
That bird's not getting into the final 4. I'm sorry. I'm going for crows and ravens or some kind of corvid. Are you kidding? I'm going for the ones that have the densest neurons.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
The smart
Gathering
ones.
And
information.
capable of
Fair
learning
Okay.
and conveying information.
Oh,
Yes,
that's true.
That's wise.
Yeah.
I'm going with the corvid.
Okay.
Certainly
Every
in things
time.
like Lord of the Rings, there's the raven is definitely keeping an eye on
Yeah,
things.
there's a reason those birds figure in classic literature.
Yes.
True.
Classic
Yes.
literature.
I never never read Lord of the Rings.
I know you did.
I don't like
I heard you say
fantasy.
classic literature, though.
It is for you,
Yeah, for sure.
not for me.
All right. Well, thanks, Levi,
Yeah,
for the
good
question,
question,
and keep up the
yeah.
good work with your nephews too.
Yes.
You'll have to tell us what he does to the robins, what information he's gathering.
Yeah. They
That's
saw
just
him write this
safety in
question.
numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you've got like 100 spies, nobody's going to be able to keep track of which one you need
Yeah.
to worry about.
Yeah, that's another vote for robins. Yeah. Yes.
All right. Well, John, do you want to close this one out?
Yeah, so Peg-billed Finch, just people should keep their eyes out for these locally distributed little things that are worth a trip to try to go see.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. We appreciate it. Thanks to Daniel, our audio engineer, as well as Earhole Studios in Chicago for helping us record. You all are the best. If you have a question for us, you can reach us at podcast.birdsofafeather@gmail.com. All right. See you all next week. We love you all. Thanks.